The detectives from the Metropolitan Police found themselves in a very perplexing situation as they delved into the murder of Mary Ann Nichols. Despite their best efforts, a lack of substantial evidence hindered their progress. Bucks Row, the tragic location of Nichols' murder, transformed into a local spectacle, drawing crowds who speculated on the identity and motives of the elusive killer or potential killers. Simultaneously, the media seized upon the brutality of Mary's murder, intertwining it with the earlier killing of Martha Tabram a few weeks prior. I will discuss the murder of Martha Tabram in a later video, but for those of you who are not familiar with the Jack the Ripper case, it is largely argued that Martha Tabram was a victim of Jack, and therefore the theory of the Canonical Five could be entirely wrong, and potentially more unsolved murders in the Whitechapel area were at the hands of the Ripper. The media, who were eager to capitalise on the gruesome events, amplified the horror in the hope to sell more papers, but also took this as a key opportunity to publicly criticise the Metropolitan Police Chief, Sir Charles Warren. A quote from the Star newspaper on September 1st, 1888, exemplified the mounting pressure on the police force and criticism of Warren, suggesting the need for collaboration with the citizens of East London to apprehend the mysterious perpetrator. By September the 4th, public impatience had intensified as the police struggled to make headway. The Star newspaper identified Leather Apron as suspect number 1, although reports indicated his absence from the area for several days. The police made minimal progress, and this prompted the newspapers to report their confessed bafflement. The Times newspaper, whilst claiming that they did not want to incite alarm, equally fueled concerns by characterising the killer as a madman. Descriptions of a maniacal frenzy and lust for blood heightened anxiety in Whitechapel. The unease escalated when the Times' ominous prediction of another strike by the killer came to pass just a few days later, marking the onset of a fearful autumn of terror in Whitechapel. The funeral of Mary Ann Nichols was held on the 6th of September, and by the evening of the 8th, the Star newspaper would announce to all of Whitechapel that the killer had struck once again. This murder had taken place in the backyard of a house, number 29 Hanbury Street, reported as being hardly a stone's throw from the previous murder site, Bucks Row. The victim was identified as Annie Chapman, and the papers reported that the murder of Annie was even more horrific and ghastly than the murder of Mary Ann Nichols. It was even reported that Annie's heart and liver were over her head. Eyewitness statements are not always the most reliable, but we at the very least have a rough idea on the movements of Annie before her death. Mr. Waldron, the landlord of the 10 Bells pub, just a few streets over from Hanbury Street, where the murder had been committed, told a reporter that one of his assistants had served a middle-aged woman who answered the description of the deceased at 5 a.m. that morning. A man wearing a little skull cap and no coat stepped into the pub, called for her, and she went off with him. At 5:30 a.m, Elizabeth Long reportedly sees Annie Chapman with a man hard against the shutters of 29 Hanbury Street. Long overhears the man say, "Will you?" and Annie replies, "Yes." Long is certain of the time, as she had heard the clock on the Black Eagle Brewery strike the half hour just as she had turned onto the street. Annie was facing Elizabeth Long, but unfortunately the man had his back to her, so she was unable to provide a thorough description of him. A few moments after the Long sighting, Albert Kadosh, a young carpenter living at 27 Hanbury Street, walks into his backyard. He hears voices quite close, and the only word he can make out is a woman saying no. He then heard something falling against the fence. Annie's body was discovered a little before 6 a.m. by John Davis, a carman who lived on the 3rd floor of number 29 with his family. The locations of the murders are extremely interesting to me, as they were so close to each other. Studies into serial killers suggest that these type of criminals commit their crimes close to home, often within a 2-mile radius. Now, we cannot put all killers into the same category, of course, but with the murders of Mary and Annie being so close together in terms of location and dates, it could be strongly argued that the killer was local and lived among them. Perhaps he even knew them, a familiar local face that the victims recognised. The timing of Annie's murder is also intriguing. Her murder must have taken place between 5:30 and 6 a.m. It seems to me that the killer has taken a very large risk here. It is not in the dead of night and under the cover of complete darkness. An early autumnal morning in a busy area doesn't seem to be an ideal place to commit such a violent act. So, what can we learn about the killer from this? Was the murder of Annie Chapman planned, or did the Ripper find himself with an unexpected opportunity? And does the timing of Annie's murder potentially provide us with an indication of the Ripper's occupation? Could the Ripper have been on his way or coming home from work when he stumbled across Annie? Let me know your thoughts and theories.